So my name is Han. I run the Solution Architect team at SecurityScoreCard, and today we'll be talking about third-party risk management. So this is statistics from Poneman Institution in 2017. The statistics are interesting, right? Eaten by a shark is about 1 in 4 million. Getting struck by lightning is about 1 in 1 million. But experiencing a data breach is slightly more than 1 in 4. So it's about 27% in 2017. And when we look at it itself, it's really because the way that we do risk management today can't keep up with the evolving threat landscape. Attackers are working together. They're creating an industry, a cyber criminal industry, ransomware as a service, phishing as a service. You probably heard of those, right? So attackers are working together. Why not the good guys? Next is, of course, attack surface. As we work with more and more suppliers and we use cloud and we look at different providers as well, our attack surface grows, but there's really no way to really track it. Visibility is key. If we can't have visibility, we can't protect what we don't know. Next is also intelligence, right? This is coming from the idea that there is a staff shortages in cybersecurity. Most cybersecurity folks here are probably overworked. And of course, when there's an incident itself, it's even worse. So we are starting to look into things like using generative AI, like the presenters before me, talking about how we can use AI to help support the needs of the cybersecurity team. Last but not least is, of course, third-party risk, right? It's been a topic that has been abandoned for a long time, right? The traditional approaches that we take towards third-party risk can't really keep up with the growing reliance that we have to our third and fourth parties itself. So if we look at the world's largest breaches, you see big names there, right? Big names that we think of and we expect them to have huge budget, huge security budget to protect themselves. So you see Facebook multiple times, you see Shanghai Police, you see Twitter, you see Cathay Pacific and all of that. And if we look at it itself, the statistics has risen a little bit. In 2022, 7 in 10 organizations were really compromised because of unknown, 0 days, or poorly managed internet-facing assets, right? We can see it with Twitter, right, where they had a vulnerability, the data was stolen and was sold. We saw Optus having unsecured APIs, Norton LifeLogs, customers were impacted when there was a credential stuffing attack against Norton. So when we look at all of this in totality, most organizations' premise is that there's a perimeter, right? There's a line around my organization that I need to defend, right? That's where you put your firewalls, that's where you put your deception tags and all of that. The whole idea is to keep my data in and keep the bad guys out. So what happens here is that when we work with more and more organizations, as we work with more and more organizations, like your technology providers, your vendors, your SaaS providers, and all of that, that is a data outflow, right? You're starting to share your data outwards. So these are what we call trusted third parties. But how did that trust come into place? Was it simply a questionnaire? Was it a continuous view? Or is it just upfront at onboarding where we looked at the vendors, but we don't look at it until 1 year later at recontract, right? So these are food for thought. And again, do you have the visibility? The bosses are asking, what's our risk exposure? Do we know our supply chain risk exposure? Because third-party risk is a growing concern. Do we have a way to measure that? Do we know what my entire exposure is? How do I automate and validate all of that information as well? So this comes to a point where attackers are starting to leverage these weak points, right? They're not going to target the bank. The bank has good security, most likely. They're going to target the vendors to get into the organizations itself. So we see these supply chain attacks all the time, right? Earlier last year, Toyota had to stop their production line because of a ransomware attack against Kojima, which is one of their suppliers. We saw Okta, and Okta again in the past few days. In terms of the breaches, Okta is a third party to many. 3CX, which is a voice over IP software, is a second link supply chain attack. attackers were targeting a trading technologies, which is a trading software, and they used an opportunistic attack into 3CX, which was the first known two-link supply chain attacks. TSMC, right, the world's biggest semiconductor manufacturer, they were targeted. They didn't get breached, but their provider, Kinmax, was the one that got breached. And when we looked at the score itself, they were scoring a big D. D for very bad score, right? And when we look at it itself, so many others, Aramco, SolarWinds, we saw in the past, and it's all because of the factors that I mentioned, right? A lot of times, organizations are using technology to drive their businesses. There's a reliance on third parties. That's a vast amount of risk, and the attackers are getting the attacks are getting more and more sophisticated because the bad guys are working together. The smart ones build the software, they sell it as a service, and those who don't know it just buy that service and use it for attacks as well. So you can see all of this all coming together as a whole. And it becomes increasingly difficult to secure because last year, 54% of the breaches itself was caused by a third party. So it's not a direct attack, more than half was by a third party. And we see the big names on the screen there as well. So really, the way to go about doing it is visibility, number one, but at the same time, a simple way to measure that risk. And that's what we want to try and do, to quantify the trustworthiness, to strengthen your defenses, and verify whether my vendors are truly secure. And the whole goal here is, coming back to this picture again, is that we want to now be able to have a desired state where we can have the continuous visibility of not just myself, but of my third parties as well. How do I automate the process? How do I prioritize areas for remediation? Right, that is also very key. So, the whole thing here, how we go about doing that? My organization, SecurityScoreCard, we're on your left, the first booth on the left. We do data collection en masse, right? We scan the whole internet on a daily basis, in depth on a weekly basis, across 1,500 ports. We take that data, we figure out what's wrong with the internet. We have sensors inside of China and Russia that allows us to already see a very unique lens of the internet itself, because there's different flavors of the internet at the same time. At the same time, we figure out what makes up an organization, the IP addresses and domains, and we combine these two data sets and score it, right? When we do a scoring itself, it's from 0 to 100, 0 being the worst, 100 being the best, and we map it to an A to F grading. So you saw earlier during the commercial itself, A is good, F is bad. 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 90 is a B, and so forth, and anything below 60 is an F. So to just take a snapshot of it, right, we are looking at effectively about 4.1 billion IP addresses every 7 days or so across 1,500 ports. We look at dark web, we're able to collect leaked credentials. In fact, today we are scanning over 60 Telegram groups, which is making up the underground clouds of logs. That's where the bad guys are sharing the credentials that they've stolen and they have itself, and they're trying to sell it underground in that marketplace itself. We're able to collect malware because we run one of the largest malware infrastructure in the world, sinkhole infrastructure in the world, and all this data are also going back to regulators, nation states as well. And of course, we use AI to power it. But more critically, the A to F don't just represent the posture, but also the maturity of the company in terms of the security practices and a likelihood of breach. A company that is scoring an F is about 7.7 times more likely to be breached. So you might be wondering, why am I saying this? The reason is because you can use this to monitor your third parties. So the whole, all in all itself, there's different maturities that different organizations have. Most organizations are using a very manual process, and we want to automate that, right? So you have different processes in flow, right? How do we automate that is also key. And there's also different ways of looking at it itself. So onboarding cycle, automation, having the continuous visibility and resilience is also key. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going a little quick. Build a program, scale it, quickly import, and be able to look at the data points. Having the workflow to have that rules and automation, so you don't have to log in the platform every day. having that decision to drive automatic dev, look at the third, even your fourth parties, and having that insights, and looking at ROI as well, right? So calculating the risk in dollar value of impact to the organization. And with that, thank you. It's not loading, but thank you very much.
All right, a big round of applause, please, for Mr. Han Yang Lau of SecurityScoreCard through WSI. Thank you, Mr. Lau, for sharing that insightful redefinition of third-party cybersecurity risk management talk. Of course, that was brought to us by our platinum sponsor, SecurityScoreCard through WSI. And during his talk, he was saying that a one-dimensional approach to risk management really can't keep up with the evolving threat landscape, especially since a lot of the actors or the attackers out there are now collaborating and making things a little bit more difficult for you to catch. So you have to measure the risk, understand the security of third parties, and improve security, and therefore eliminate that risk as well.